Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
This has been an incredibly challenging time in our family. Losses compounded, 2 on the same day in the hours just before Shabbat. As our cousin Debbie mentioned yesterday when we remembered Aunt Flossie, the seats at our family's Seder are at a premium. A wait list, she said. Sadly, there will be 2 long-held seats whose occupants will be missed this year. But the presence of Uncle Mitchell and Aunt Flossie will be felt unmistakably. As they neared the end, as they departed this world, the Jewish world was already in deep mourning, but the Jewish calendar was marking a transition. We had just moved from the Hebrew month of Av into the last month of the Jewish year, Elul. The month of Av starts incredibly sad with Tisha B'Av, and over the course of the month, it earns its full name, Menachem Av. Av, related thematically to the word for father. And Menachem, meaning comfort. So we start this path with comfort, and then transition to this next month where we find ourselves now, Elul, whose name is understood as an acronym for the Hebrew verse, Ani L'Dodi, V'Dodi Li, Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed, Elul. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. So that's the path over the last 2 months of the Jewish year, over these last difficult days. We start with sadness over a parent. We find comfort, Menachem Av. And then before our year is out, what we are left, appropriately for you, Aunt Sharon, is Elul, Ani L'Dodi. Together, our family is on that path with this time of mourning and comfort and love filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. And so with thanks to the Bethel clergy who have been so supportive for the Cohens, we begin our service today with the recitation of a psalm, thus linking the life of Uncle Mitchell, Mitchell Cohen, Chaim Michel ben Zelig HaKohen Umunsi, with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai rohi lo echzar, V'hino deshet yarvitzeni, El memnucho jenaleini, Nafshi yeshovev, Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni b'magle tzedek, Lemhan shemho. Gam ki elech, Beget samhaved, Lo yirara, Ki hatahim hadi, Shivtecha, Umishantecha, Shivtecha, Umishantecha, Hemayen hachamoni. Taharok lefanai shochan. Tarok lefanai shochan. Taharok lefanai shochan. Neged zorerai. Dishanta vashem en roshi. Dishanta vashem en roshi. Dishanta vashem en roshi. Osirevaya. Achtov. Achtov hachesed. Irdefuni. Kol yemei chayai. Veshavti bevet Adonai. Veshavti bevet Adonai. Leorech yamim.
Thank Rabbi Hollander for chanting so beautifully Psalm 23. I'll get to the translation of the psalm in just a moment, but first I want to say that on his behalf, I'm sure, and that of Rabbi Krupnik, Rabbi Marshall, the entire Bethel leadership, both professional and volunteer, and especially that of our Chazan, Lisa Pomeranz-Boro, who in these moments faces her own significant family loss. We're with you. We are with you in love. We're with you in sadness. Praying for you in these moments as we also share in remembering Mitchell Cohen with such great fondness and such deep love. I want to say also that as much as it was very nice of Rabbi Yanoff to acknowledge Bethel clergy, Rabbi, we acknowledge and embrace and are so grateful for your presence. I was thinking that, if you're going to have a rabbi in the family, it's good to have a really super competent one. Rabbi Yanoff is known by all of his colleagues, and I mean without exception, as a rabbi, leader, and teacher who is truly compassionate and caring and also wise. We thank you for your unending support. So Psalm 23 that Rabbi Hollander chanted was chosen long ago for inclusion in almost every Jewish funeral service, in part because it mentions the Gates Almavet, the valley of the shadow, which for centuries has been translated as the valley of the shadow of death, this darker and this sadder place through which mourners begin to travel the path of loss. The psalm also teaches by way of implication that we travel this path as mourners, but we're never alone unless we choose to be alone, and I pray that you will not ever choose to travel this darker path alone. Faith, family, and friends are always with us, and to that I would add that support, love, and embrace of community also holds us up as we walk this path. I simply cannot emphasize enough how pained and saddened the Bethel community is and how firmly we stand with this very special family as you face such a profoundly difficult loss. And I want to emphasize as well, with equal affirmation, that it is our most honest plan to affirm the power and even the joy of celebrations that are soon to come binding the generations one to the next. Those smachot that I am fully certain Mitchell would have insisted that we will embrace with full hearts. But today, this week and beyond, we are with you in memory, tribute, appreciation, and also in deep mourning for all that we appreciated and respected about your and our beloved Mitchell Cohen. Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul and guides me in straight paths for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our speakers in tribute, reflection, share words of love, affection, and beautiful memories. I'm told they're all going to come up to the bima here together. And so we call on Jonathan and Joshua, Nikki, Julie, and Devin representing this wonderful family.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here to celebrate my dad's life, including those on the live stream. Before I pass this over to Josh, Nikki, and the girls, I want to make sure we thank some people that have helped us tremendously over the last couple weeks. Thank you to the Bethel clergy, Chazan Pomerantz Borough, Rabbi Englander, and Rabbi Hollander for supporting us through this time of need, and to our cousin Eric for your comfort and guidance navigating our childhood memories as we prepared for today. Thank you, Lois, for staying with us in New York this last week and for being our second mom always. And to Jake and his family for giving us a place to stay in the city so that we could all be with Dad around the clock in his final days. Samantha and Amanda, we love you. We can't thank you enough for being there with us. Finally, I want to recognize our Aunt Flossie. She passed on the same day as my dad. Aunt Flossie was my fairy godmother. She helped create and carry on the special family traditions at our Seder. We love you, Aunt Flossie. And thank you all so much for all the kind messages. My dad would have been so thankful as well. Now my brother Josh will say a few words, or pages.
I swear, it's just a big font and double-spaced. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright, blessed day, the dark, sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. These words come from one of my dad's favorite songs, and they simultaneously describe his wonder for the world and the dichotomy of the final months of his life. The bright, blessed days of June, when we celebrated his 70th birthday and 50th wedding anniversary, to the dark, sacred night as he slipped away from us at the end of last week. How is it possible that we are here today to say goodbye to my dad? A month ago, he was the guy that had beaten cancer. He'd been in remission for over 8 years. It was barely more than 3 weeks ago that he sat watching silly YouTube videos in his living room with my son Leo. Dad, this all happened too quickly and too suddenly. In the shock of this moment, I struggled to find the right words to share with you today. I want to speak about his love, about his humor, his grumpiness, his loyalty, everything that made him such an incredible man. But perhaps most of all, his strength. I've witnessed his strength my entire life, but it really hit me 2 days ago. The day after he passed, I was sitting with Leo, talking about Zadie, and building a marble maze together. And like most 6-year-old boys, Leo was focused on the fun, winding part of the maze, the higher, the better. But when it started to shake, Leo was worried that the maze would fall over. I told him, you need to put support columns under all the pieces. Strong, foundational, supportive. In that moment, it struck me, that was exactly what my dad was. A support to each and every one of us. He was never the one to be front and center, but instead was in the background, supporting us and holding us up. He was our biggest cheerleader, always so proud of his children and grandchildren. He would beam with joy at our graduations, our shows, our job successes, and he would comfort us in times of tragedy. Whether happy or sad, we could always expect the biggest, strongest hugs from Dad. And now, without that support beneath us, we're all falling to pieces. On Thursday, when the cancer started to take over his body, our family gathered in the hospital room in New York to say goodbye. The doctors thought he would pass in minutes. Many hours later, he was still with us. And one of the doctors remarked, "Some people are just too strong for their own good." Damn right. This was the man who was diagnosed with multiple myeloma and was given 5 years but turned it into 12. When his vitamin business went bankrupt, he got a job as an assistant store manager at Electronics Boutique and worked his way up to regional vice president, helping that company become part of one of the largest retail gaming corporations in the world. 1 year ago, he found his life turned upside down. The woman who had cared for him through so many years of illness now needed him. And boy, did he step up. He got her to every doctor's appointment, every therapy visit. He encouraged her. He pushed her. He yelled at her. And he loved her. He used his strength to make her stronger. My dad also had strength in his convictions, a trait that he has generously shared with all the Cohen men, a trait some of you might refer to as stubbornness. Whether about something deeply technical like how good RX works, or ridiculously mundane like how to pronounce Ultima, he had to be right, and unfortunately for us, he usually was. It helped that he had a gifted intellect, which he would prodigiously show off while watching Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune, or with the rapidity with which he completed a crossword puzzle. He was brilliant. And he certainly had strength in his sense of humor. You've all heard that deep, sonorous belly laugh, usually following one of his own jokes, regardless of whether anyone else was laughing along with him. And he loved to do impressions like Kermit the Frog or Donald Duck and Louis Armstrong. And even if they were not the best, he always did them with a very self-satisfied grin on his face. And he found joy in so many moments. He loved hosting parties where he would barbecue and occasionally show his prowess at beer pong. He loved times at the beach, playing pinochle, smoking a cigar, or simply enjoying time with the kids, grandkids, and cousins. he derived so much joy from spending time with others. And he had this wonderful way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room, that you were loved and supported and heard. Now, you might not think of grumpiness as a superpower, or as a strength, sorry, but my dad wielded it as a superpower. He would shout at refs during a Eagles game or the umpires during a Phillies game, outraged by their awful calls. And if complaining was an Olympic sport, he would have more medals than Simone Biles. But as the years went by, that grumpiness became more charming, a reliable role that he would fill in a way that was eerily comforting. One of his most powerful strengths was his fierce loyalty. Small actions like cutting our exes out of photographs, or giant ones like the extraordinary dedication to my mom and her recovery over the last year. If you were on my dad's side, there was nothing he wouldn't do for you. And there was truly nothing he wouldn't do for us. But there was one person for whom he would stop the world: my mom. It's hard to find words to express the relationship, the support, the tradition, the bickering, the happiness, the hardship, the love. Mom, Dad loved you with all his heart. He loves you more than anything in the world. And we are forever grateful for the example you set and the family you built. Dad, thank you for supporting all of us on your strong shoulders, for the love and affection you always showed us, and for being the best husband, dad, and Zadie any of us could have asked for. We love you always.
Well, I didn't go to Harvard or anything. But I wanted to start off by saying that we're all up here together because Sharon and Mitch always wanted us to all be together. I'm Nikki, I'm their daughter-in-law, or as they would say, daughter-in-love. Some people have complicated relationships with their in-laws, but it was never like that for us. Mitch welcomed me from day one with open arms. After he passed, a friend told me a story she remembered about when she saw Mitch shortly after Jonathan and I got married, and he raved about his new ringtone. She said it went like this: "Your daughter is calling, your daughter is calling." And she said he was so excited to call me his daughter because he'd never had one before. And I felt it. He always made sure to tell me how much he loves me. He was always his true self with me, allowing us to be as close as we were. Plus, since I came along, he finally had someone to laugh at his jokes. At Shabbat dinners, not every joke would land well, so he would turn to me and say, "See, that was funny, Nikki liked that one." And he was right, I did always like his humor. And Mitch always wanted to get on Wheel of Fortune, but he wanted us to do it together. He used to tell me that he applied for us as a duo, and he was so excited about the idea of us getting on together that I actually went online, I filmed myself, and I submitted an application to try and get on with him as a team. I wish they would have picked us because we would have crushed it, but I think I'll continue to keep trying just for him. Sharon always called Jonathan Chip off the old block, because she felt that he and Mitchell were so similar in many ways. And one thing I've always noticed is how much John insists with our children that they be polite and hold doors for people and say please and thank you. Not that they ever listen, but he tries. And that was always a big thing for Mitch. He was kind to every waiter, waitress, service provider, always holding doors and being polite, making them feel seen. That was just one of the many great things that John learned from his dad. And if you know anything about John and Mitch was apparently a big skee ball player and loved the arcade. And if you know anything about John and his girls, they are the king and queens of the arcade. We will always think of Zadie when we win a really, really ridiculously big stuffed animal or a donut maker. Mitch was always so smart, much smarter than me, but he knew the most random things, and I loved to learn from him. He didn't just teach me things like prunes are actually dried plums. Who knew? But he would do it all the time with his grandkids. Walking on the boardwalk after dinner at Tony's, he would know the history of Atlantic City or random facts about a building or a president that visited. I never questioned his accuracy. I think for the most part, he was always right, except for that one time when Josh told him he was wrong. And Mitch was a big Phillies and Eagles fan. He watched or listened during soccer games to every game with his boys while they were growing up, creating lifelong diehards. But for the Phillies, he would always say, they only lose when I watch them. And lo and behold, they went on a 6-game win streak while he wasn't watching. Another sign that he's always right. And as for the Eagles, John and I smile when we think about him and our friend Josh Katz watching the games together, and of course, yelling at the refs. Mitch wore many hats. He was the master barbecuer. If you just give him a sweatband and he's your guy, especially if you like your burgers burnt or well done. However, he did somehow get Drew, who only eats Fruity Pebbles, to start liking salmon. So that's got to mean he was the best. And he always loved having a helper. Dana and Emmett would be his food runner back and forth from the table to the grill. He was also surprisingly a good beer pong player. We had those summer parties at the Shore House. Oh, he loved those summer parties. Every year, someone would have to have a graduation or a big birthday coming up, so he'd have an excuse to throw a party. And then we would set up the beer pong, and he was the dark horse. He and Jonathan were quite the pair, beating everyone off the table, and he just loved it. I wish I'd thought of it back then. I probably should have made him a beer pong champion t-shirt because he always loved a good personalized shirt. Another hat that Mitchell wore, particularly in this last year since Sharon's fall, was that of caretaker. It was a hard year, but Mitch stepped up to the plate to care for Sharon in sickness and in health, and surprisingly, he never even complained about it. Okay, maybe a little. And I joke, but I am grateful that he took on that role with pride and gusto, because Sharon, his true love, showed us that miracles can happen. But his favorite title of all was Zadie, and as Devin would say, he's the best hugger. But not just that, he was the king of surprising them with random gifts for no reason at all. After dinner, he would give them their Amazon box, and he would sit with them, open the package right then and there, and teach them how to use the mind puzzle or the magic tricks or put the batteries in the race cars. He would sit on the porch at the shore, and together they would enjoy their new toy, and they all loved it. And finally, at every simcha, wedding, family bat mitzvah, he would always ask me to save him a dance, and I always did. And Devin's bat mitzvah is coming up in just 2 weeks, and I know that he'll be looking down with such pride. Celebrating these mitzvahs, especially those of his grandchildren, were always his greatest joy. So Mitchell, in 2 weeks, on Devin's big day, I promise to save you a dance. I love you, and I miss you, and I will cherish our relationship forever. Okay.
Hi, I'm Julie, Zadie's oldest grandchild, and frankly the best one. When I was little, Zadie owned a coffee shop in Philly called Caffeination. I hung out there so much that he should have added me to the payroll. I treasured that time with him. Every time we saw Zadie, he had a gift for us, but it was usually some weird puzzle that no one could figure out but him. He was always so smart and enjoyed crossword puzzles, and he taught me how to play Sudoku. Zadie was the master at making sure to save things and make them last forever. Once he discovered the vacuum seal, everything was so fresh. But the problem was, you could never figure out how to open it ever again. Bubby and Zadie always wrote me letters at camp each summer. His letters were funny. He once wrote me that he swallowed a whole orange and it was stuck in his throat. I think it was actually something medical, but you can imagine how weird that was reading about how he swallowed an orange. It was just Zadie being Zadie. There definitely was no one like our Zadie. I will miss you so much, and I will miss your corny jokes. I love you, Zadie.
Hi, I'm Devin.
When I was little, Zadie used to babysit me in their Philadelphia house. Just me and him. We walked along the river and went to museums. This time with my Bubby and Zadie was so special, and it meant so much to both him and to me. I also loved spending time with him at the shore each summer. He would walk to the corner store after dinner so I could buy an ice cream on the days when we weren't going to 2 Cents Plain. One birthday, he took me on a trip to Walmart and let me buy all of the slime supplies that I wanted. He didn't know that my parents didn't allow slime in the house, and it was the best present ever. Zadie and I had a special bond, and he always called me his favorite hugger. I'm sad that he won't be there with me for my upcoming bat mitzvah, but I know that he will be looking down on me and smiling with pride. I love you, Zadie, and I will miss you forever.
Such beautiful words of love. You know, the most well-known word for love in Judaism, ahava, means so much more than love. It originally comes from treaty language, a treaty, a pact, a pledge of loyalty, of binding our fates together in good times and bad. That's what the V'ahavta paragraph of the Shema is about. It's something deeper than the romance of the movies, though, Aunt Sharon, you said that you and Uncle Mitchell shared romance as well, but ahava is something more than that. It's a fierce loyalty. The kind of loyalty you all reflected is what marked Uncle Mitchell with his family, our family, and close friends, his unique relationships with individuals, giving you his full attention, making a special connection, as you said. You called him a mensch. You talked about that loyalty, how he would focus on details in recent months down to the number of cherries for Aunt Sharon for breakfast, even if Aunt Sharon, you insisted you could get your own breakfast, even when Jonathan and the girls, you found yourself, despite yourselves, benefiting from that lesson of his to be polite and open doors, seeing how that eventually benefited you in professional and personal lives. Ahava, loyalty, love, even if you maybe didn't always laugh at every one of his jokes. He was there for you. He'd tell the joke again and again, because it's possible you didn't hear the joke or didn't quite get its nuance, right? And then, if you still didn't laugh, he was so good that he would actually do your job for you. He would laugh at his own joke. Except you, Nikki, you would cover him every time you'd laugh. Uncle Mitchell had a fierce loyalty to family and also to his Judaism. It was a deep commitment to him, both in the family where he loved the traditions and in the community, including over now 3 generations at Bethel, where he and Aunt Sharon helped lead in a number of ways, like the Hanukkah Bazaar, the Young Associates. But for him, Judaism was spiritual as well. It came out in several ways. I remember over a decade ago when he approached me about the custom of adding another Hebrew name in the face of his multiple myeloma diagnosis and treatment. We added the name Chaim. And yes, it added more Chaim. Some dozen years more Chaim, more time together. And Sharon and Josh, Jonathan, Jeremy, that Chaim was time to meet and deepen relationships with his son's partners in life. Nikki, Emily, Jake, and with his 7 grandchildren, Julie, Devin, Dana, Drew, Emmett, Leo, and now Alana. I'm not going to comment on which one's best. He was a believer. Yes, in his family. Yes, in his Judaism. And yes, in Neil deGrasse Tyson. In John Meacham. And yes, a believer also in things he read online and wherever he picked up his random tidbits of information. And Sharon, you often were the gatekeeper of that information. He was a believer, yes, a believer in you all and in me too as his nephew. I felt that. It came from years of ahava, of love, of loyalty, of believing in those close to him. And so we're going to just take a few minutes now to look back over a lifetime of ahava, of love and loyalty. Mitchell Cohen was born June 3rd, 1954 in Philadelphia to George and Marlene with sisters Judy and Cindy, as well as Kathy with Carol, who's on live stream. He was very close with his grandparents, especially also with his Aunt Sissy and Uncle Jack, Daria and Bobby. He would tell you about growing up and playing in the neighborhood of his friends from AZA, where he was president, the Aleph Gadol, as you said, Aunt Sharon. He went to Northeast High School, where he was a good student, except in French, despite my mom's efforts. He was involved in Spark and the Robotics Club. He had many friends. One friend, Neil Flummenberg, became a doctor, and that set the bar for all future doctors. And though he always said he dated many girls, one girl set the bar there, too. Sharon Linder. You met on the day of the senior prom. You were not planning to go to prom, and instead you decided to visit a friend, Lois, out of town. But ever the student, you and Sharon decided to attend some of your classes that morning. But your rebellion was cutting homeroom, so that you wouldn't have attendance taken in each of the other classes. You would duck in and out under the radar. You went to a few extra lunch periods that day, and at one of those lunches, Mitchell came up to you as you sat with someone you both knew and said to your friend, "Aren't you going to introduce me?" Your first date was to the Orleans movie theater. You saw Little Big Man. You went out to eat at Continental Pizza, where Mitchell ordered 2 whole pizzas. Now, for those of you who don't know, Aunt Sharon is an epically picky eater. It was crazy, the idea of eating a whole pizza, but like with the telling of jokes, Mitchell covered it by eating a pizza and a half. That was just a taste of his future eating quirks, which later featured heaping salads, an odd preoccupation with sun-dried tomatoes, fake bacon bits, and more, each ingredient, as we heard, stored in an airtight container. Not to mention the Cohen barbecues that were to come, where he presided, didn't grill, presided. Mother's Day, I remember, summer parties, the Ventnor Block Party. You should have known back then the Continental Pizza, Aunt Sharon. Anyway, the rest is history. You graduated Northeast, and in that ceremony, he ducked low in line to get to you so you could walk down the graduation aisle together. He came down the shore every weekend that summer, staying at a rooming house nearby to our family's summer home. You were with him as he was navigating tough times in his young adulthood, including the loss of his father not long before you'd met. Again, ahava, standing with someone through thick and thin. That's what love is. The graduation aisle was not the only aisle you'd walk together. You were married June 23rd, 1974. We heard about the 50th wedding anniversary party thrown by your kids. Also, your 25th anniversary was marked by a trip to Israel. And Sharon, you shared how much you loved one another, again through ups and downs and many Amazon purchases. The kids picture you together as very affectionate, always holding hands, doing everything, a love affair, you called it. You had and have a close friend group. Josh, you came along 2 years later than Jonathan and Jeremy. As a father, you remember your dad as someone who made the fun, how he decorated the house for holidays. I remember, and you shared how much he loved the Hanukkah celebration with our whole family, how proud he was to Arba Imahot at the Seder. He loved your friends. He would always ask about them. He was happy when they came over, and yes, they came over because he was an early first adopter of virtually every video gaming system. You called him everyone's second dad. I remember the train table. It's one of the many projects around the house where he tinkered, as you said. Among his several jobs in young adulthood, Mitchell had worked in amusements in Wildwood, so he knew which games were worth playing and which ones were rarely winnable. Jonathan Skee-Ball, to the tune of 138,000 tickets this past summer. That's a lot. Jeremy, you recalled how when he'd been on business trips or even from Cherry Hill down the shore for the weekend, he'd make sure to leave something special on your bed. You now do that for Emmett. And Josh, you spoke about admiring his resilience as he climbed up the ranks in electronics boutique. The family expanded as well, not just his professional scope. Through marriage, you admired how your father lovingly welcomed in the people whom you love. Jake, he thought he was pretty slick when he said, when he introduced you to one of the doctors as our future son-in-law. No pressure, but hey. But in the end, there was no in-law title for Mitchell. It was just daughter, as you said, Nikki, or daughter in love. He treated you as one of the family. He sang your praises to others. Emily, you were taken by how, when you first met him, he spent time to catch you up on years of family lore. He told you all the backstories. He brought you in. And of course, as we heard, his number one job was Zadie. He loved to list you all. Julie, Devin, Dana, Drew, Emmett, Leo, and now Alana. He was so excited to add her to his Zadie shirt. And now there were girls in the Cohen family, he marveled. Your family vacations together have made memories to last. It must be said, Uncle Mitchell had his quirks. Nikki, you made a profession of making fun of him, especially for his detail orientation. He was a punctilious rule follower. He did not like it when others went out of bounds. He reported people's license plates to the police if they sped down Chapel Avenue. That is not an invitation for you all to now speed down Chapel Avenue. As we heard, he shouted reminders to the refs and umpires of Phillies and Eagles games. He needed everything in its proper place, but that attention to detail came out most in his care of you, Aunt Sharon. It is true that over the years you have both cared for one another, and as he struggled with health, and this year and a half has been hard for you, you were each other's guiding light, source of strength. He was so focused on your care. As we heard, he stipulated the number of cherries and cut up strawberries at breakfast. It gave him peace to know that you would be okay and cared for by the family that you had created together. And in recent days, with the help of Lois, you focused on his care again. After adding more than a decade of Chaim, Uncle Mitchell was adamant that he did not want to suffer again in the end. He dictated his terms, and while we are never in full control and things devolved more quickly than expected, his intentions were clear. Of course, we wanted more time. We always want more time with the people we love, but as you gathered at his bedside, we said the Vidui prayer, we acknowledged that the end was approaching. You said Shema on his behalf. And you told him how much you love him, how much you will remember him, as he, after one last overnight fight, as we heard, slipped from this world into the Olam Shel Emet, the realm of God's truest loving kindness. And we will remember him. You'll think of him always, but especially at the little moments. You'll see his chair at the shore house, or his seat at the table. You'll hear in your mind at the Seder his Arba Imahot. You'll hear him in your head commenting on your driving, or if you're running late. You'll think of him if you dare to deviate one cherry from his regimen for Aunt Sharon's care. You'll show your ahava, your love, your loyalty to family and to one another, and it will be fueled and inspired by his legacy. Indeed, that's what ensures our prayer at this moment, Tihi nishmatot tzarura b'tzura chayim, that the soul of Mitchell Cohen, Chaim Michel ben Zeliga Cohen Umunsi, be bound up in the bonds of life, just as you were so often bound up in the hugs of Chaim Michel, in the bonds of life, of love, of loyalty, of memory eternal. Ken Yhi Ratzon, so may it be God's will, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you to Rabbi Yanov, Eric, and to the whole family for those beautiful tributes. This time we rise in body or in spirit for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochem Pamromim, Amse Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'malo Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Chaim Michel, Ben Zelek HaKohen V'Munsi, Shalach L'Olam Ho, Began Heden Tieh Menuchato. Ana Barachamim, Astirehu V'Seter Knafecha L'Olamim, Utzor B'Tzor HaChaim En Nishbato, Adonai V'Nachlato, V'yanuach v'shalom amishkavo, v'nomar, Amen.
El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure. To the soul of Chaim Michel ben Zelig Cohen Umunsi, Mitchell Cohen, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and we say, Amen. I want to remind everyone, as has been previously communicated, Shiva commences today and will be observed through Sunday morning. There are visitation times and service times each of those days, and we ask you to pay attention to those frameworks that have been communicated. I'm going to ask you to be seated for just a few more moments.